Hi,
Yes.
Brigida. We're just
Hi.
going live. So turn off your video and put yourself on mute. And then I'll make some introductions, and then we're going to do a few minutes on an upcoming course on burnout, and then I'll introduce the two of you. Perfect. Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising. Over the last week, as I was on retreat there by Yosemite National Park, I was bringing in the spirit of the trees through a fire that was actually taking place. And so I wanted to give everybody an update. The Washburn fire, it was a week ago today that a human-made fire started near the southern border of Yosemite and began to threaten the Mariposa Grove of sequoias, some of the most ancient sequoia trees in the world, one of which, called Giant Grizzly, has stood for over 3,000 years. It's worth noting that it was Abraham Lincoln back in 1864, even during the Civil War, who established the Mariposa Grove as a sacred trust because of the preciousness of those sequoias. And over the last week, this fire, started by humans, has been engulfing that area and threatening those mother trees. And over the last couple of days, the firefighters thought that they were gaining control and it was 20% contained. And then yesterday, the fire spread from 2,000 acres to over 4,000 acres, and winds. The fire is so hot that it creates its own kind of weather vortex above the fires, so it creates the wind. And the wind is now taking the fire into the Sierra National Forest, and they've increased the number of firefighters up to over 1,000 firefighters as we speak today are seeking to protect the mother trees of the Mariposa Grove. So I just want to bring in the spirit of the trees, the spirit of nature. We are nature, and this contradiction between humanity and the larger ecosystem, that we go to nature for solace, as I did, to go out into the wild. And simultaneously, humans are starting fires that are burning down nature. And it's within that deep contradiction that our fate in the 2020s, as climate change spins out of control, as deeply committed human beings like those of you who are joining Humanity Rising are doing everything we all can to preserve what we've inherited. And as you've probably heard, the single most concise sentence that I can think of to describe our predicament is that things are getting better and better and worse, faster and faster. And history and nature hangs in the balance. So it's within that context that I want to welcome you to the second day of our exploration of the therapeutic use of psychedelics, and explore how nature can actually aid human beings in developing the illumination that can transform a breakdown into a breakthrough. All that's available through nature. So we're in the middle of a 3-day program on how plant medicine can assist human beings at this time, therapeutically. Before we dive into that domain and other things, let us just pause as we always do and just center ourselves in our bodies. remembering that our bodies are nature. You see trees behind me. As we breathe, the trees breathe. We are the trees. And let us just focus on our hearts, and just for a minute, in a spirit of deep gratitude that we're alive, let us just feel love for the sequoias, for the mother trees. And through the trees, let us feel love for each other. Thank you, everyone. I find such great solace in this 1 minute of just listening to the Ave Maria and feeling love and compassion and solidarity with all of you and the larger ecosystem. So I just want to thank everybody for taking this minute. Before we dive into the program with Stan and Brigitte Groff, we want to take just 5 minutes to promote a course that we're offering on burnout and resilience. One of the comments that have been very persistent in Humanity Rising, as people feel all the stresses of the pandemic and the stresses of runaway climate change and modernity and the war in the Ukraine and everything that's going on, is all the indicators of stress virtually everywhere in the world are going up. So one of the things that we try to do at Humanity Rising and through Ubiquity University is offer courses so that you can rekindle the fires within, so that you can develop the transformational processes to prevent burnout, which lowers one's immune system and makes one more and more susceptible to not only COVID, but a range of illnesses, both of the body and the mind and the emotions and the psyche. So I just want to introduce Stephanie Mines. She's a PhD. She's a neuroscientist and embryologist who has been convening a series of programs on Humanity Rising on regenerative health. And as we've gotten to know each other and talk, she just felt that she wanted to offer a course on how all of us, just using natural processes, can prevent burnout and increase our resilience. So Stephanie, thank you for joining us for a few minutes this morning, and just tell us a little bit more about the course and why it's important for people to consider it.
Thank you for inviting me, Jim. And as usual, everything that you've said leading up to this moment is in complete alignment with what I want to share with you. My heart is aching for the mother trees, the sequoias. I am here in the Pacific Northwest, surrounded by an ancient rainforest that is constantly at risk. And the regenerative health that I want to share through Ubiquity is actually based on the circulation that the mother trees embody. We also have that circulatory and communicative capacity. And I am so privileged to be able to share the cutting edge resources that I have cultivated and developed specifically for this course. So I am a veteran of activism that I began to be engaged in the 70s and have consistently identified as an activist up to this present moment. And I have seen the most brilliant and innovative leaders who I have been privileged to be affiliated with go down as the result of burnout. And I'm seeing that today. And when you share about the sequoias and my heart breaks, I understand the methods by which our nervous systems and our immune systems are fragmented by this devastation that will only accelerate. And I am also an astute observer of humanity, and that led me to becoming a scientist. And I have codified my observations into remarkable approaches to ending burnout forever. And I realize that is a grandiose statement. I don't make it lightly. I live in the truth of what it means to rise from devastation consistently as a survivor of dysfunction, sexual trauma, all those afflictions of our disintegrating culture that I have addressed through my books, through my work, and I have now created approaches to ending burnout forever. I am so grateful to Ubiquity for giving me a platform. I've tested these approaches. They're clinically tested, many of them, and they have been pilot project tested through my affiliation with the Planetary Health Lab of the University of Edinburgh, and also through my program, the TAR Approach. I am so grateful and so pleased and literally bursting with eagerness to share these resources on Ubiquity University's platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. We'll have Stephanie back over the next couple of weeks. Her course is going to be convened live, 4 sessions over 4 weeks in October. But we just wanted everyone to know that the stresses that you're feeling, which we're all feeling, have remedies, and that burnout is not necessary if you take the preemptive measures that Stephanie will share with us to fortify your soul and increase your immune system. So we'll have Stephanie back, and she's also preparing future programs on regenerative health for Humanity Rising. So Stephanie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.
And we'll put the link for the course in the chat box for a moment, but those of you who aren't in the chat or watching it through Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn today, in terms of our global audience, just go to ubiquityuniversity.org and click on our courses, our live courses, and you'll see Stephanie's course on burnout and resilience. For activists, we know that most of the people attracted to Humanity Rising are active in their commitment to save humanity and save the larger ecosystem at this time. So that's a course for you. I want to now turn to our subject at hand, the psychedelic therapeutic work that's been done really since the beginning of LSD in the modern sense, but since a time immemorial, as different cultures and tribes all around the world. Everywhere we have found, people have used plants to catalyze spiritual illumination and to heal the body and the soul. So I want to thank George Caponelli, who's the founder and CEO of Age Nation, and who thought of this program today and has been putting it together. And I want to bring on Stan and Brigitte Groff. As I said yesterday, Stan and now with Brigitte has really been the pioneer, along with Albert Hoffman and a few others back many, many decades ago in the 1950s and 60s, who really, through his life, has searched as a psychonaut the pathways of the psychedelic world, and has made one breakthrough after another in the therapeutic use of the various psychedelics. And when those were prescribed by law, made an amazing breakthrough with the holotropic breathing. So I want to welcome Stan and Brigitte. But George, do you want to just say a few words of introduction before we begin the dialogue with them?
Sure. I mean, I think you've covered a lot of really important ground. We are living in a critical time, and the truth is we can't afford to stay within the limited boundaries of old prescribed practices, many of which do not work in the process of transforming consciousness and supporting the planet in the struggle that we are all having at the moment. So this is just the beginning of a much deeper dive I think we're going to take on this conversation. And it will include not only psychedelics, but it'll also include a number of other ways, as holotropic breathwork does, of allowing us to expand our consciousness and get in touch with a much deeper aspect of our own nature and our connection to nature and to consciousness. So I don't need to say much more, especially when we have such terrific guests who've been in this field for so long. So let's just get on with our dialogue, and we welcome you all to that today.
Stan and Brigitte, do you want to open up your videos and take yourself off mute and join us?
Sure.
There you go.
Hi.
Hello, dear ones.
Hello.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Jim. Hi,
First
George.
of all, how are you? How's it? How's your health? How's everything going where you are? You're in Germany, right?
Yes, yes.
Good.
It's pretty hot these days here. It's very warm, and we are, of course, affected from the war in Ukraine. That's very near. I mean, so it feels very dangerous. And also now, right now, we are facing maybe a winter without gas. So that's scary too. That's
Yeah.
so this is there's problems in this world.
Yeah, and being in Germany, in southern Germany, you would be, you're close to Ukraine. I mean, you're not that far in a
I think it's
global
2,000 kilometers, but for
Yeah.
America, this is close.
Yeah. And Stan, how are you today?
Jim, we have been there many times,
Mhm.
and I still have, of course, the problem, which I mentioned every time, that I had a stroke, which is now going to almost
4 years.
4 years. And now I added another one. We were 2 days ago. We were for
Yeah.
my problems with my eye.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's-
Otherwise, everything's fine.
when you are 91, the body requires some maintenance.
Yes.
And Brigitte, thank you so much for all your loving care of this great man. It's you are
Thank you.
like the Rock of Gibraltar.
Well, I
Yeah.
just love him. That's all.
Yeah. Should I say a few things about Brigitte, or should we introduce?
No,
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, but I have to say, I'm not the pioneer here. He's the pioneer. I'm just
Yes.
following. I'm following
No.
the path. So.
Oh. Well, we know each other now for over 36
years.
6 years.
Mhm.
We started when we were at SLN, Brigitte was there for a year at the time when we started developing the holotropic breathwork. And she basically came to every session there, both the shorters and also the month-longs. So she was learning the holotropic breathwork before we had any formal training. And since that time, you have been in Germany, also for some time, in America for some time, but then mostly for Germany, with Ingo and Sylvester. So at the time she was the youngest one. Now she says she's
Now
like a
I'm
dinosaur.
old. Now I'm old.
Anyways, and you know, we have been working for years together, and everything that I can tell you she knows, and she's also a person who's articulated, not unlike I am anymore.
I said, since the stroke went on his speech center, I help him when he doesn't find the words, but his mind is really great as always. So I said, Stan knows everything, but doesn't know all the words. And I don't know everything, but I know all the words. So we make a good team.
Now that's a marriage
Jim,
made in heaven.
Yeah. Do you have participants, and what would you like to hear?
Well, Stan, what I thought, just in a very informal, conversational way, just to tell us the story of maybe of Albert Hoffman, as you remember it, and your own exploration in the 1950s and 60s as the psychedelic experience was beginning to come into the culture. Tell us about your journey. Tell us about your origins with that. And then I thought that would give us a sense of history and a sense of context for the larger discussion that we're having. Take us back to the origins.
A bit like in my book,
Well,
right?
yeah.
Like in the book, for the first book, the development of how you changed.
Yeah. You know, I was in the 4th years of medicine when LSD came from Sanders. I had who do I participate? Who was my teacher, and he was very interested in psychedelics, but of course he didn't have the time, you know, to be with people for 6 to 8 hours. And so she found several of us who were like the gophers, you know, sitting there. So for quite a while, I was there with people who were psychiatrists, psychologists, artists, scientists. And unfortunately, we could not get LSD if we were still students. We had to get our medicitors. So I was sitting there, you know, listening these incredible stories, and really wetting my palate, appetite. Yeah. And so, for the first time, when I was when I got my promotion
Exam.
Yeah.
When you finished.
So then finally I had my first experience, and it was combined with stroboscopic
light.
This was my teacher here. He was very interested in EEG. So everybody who wanted to have EEG LSD had to have also this EEG. But also at that time, he was interested in what's called driving the brainwaves, which means exposing people with this stroboscopic, very, very powerful storm. And so what it means that, you know, between the 3rd and 4th hour, my assistant came and said, "This is the time to drive the brainwave."
Waves.
So if you put
Stroboscopic
so-
light.
yeah,
Stroboscopic.
no. And so I lay down, and she turned on the light, and at that point, I had seen light like I'd never seen.
Mm.
At the time, I thought it was something like in Hiroshima. Later, I thought that it was like from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This that we see at the time when we die. And then for some time, I was coming back where I was like in the whole universe. I had the feeling I was all universe, and there were all kinds of things happening for each. At the time, I had no names. Later I think about the Big Bang, and the black deer,
Black hole.
black holes, the white holes, and so on. Something in that situation, and then finally coming back. But the major problem was my consciousness at that point was floating around my body, and I cannot get it together. So it took me a while before finally I get them together, and I had just an amazing experience. So that it took over everything that I experienced with psychoanalysis and other things. And I decided this is something that I really want to do. So for that time, I have really done nothing else that was in one way or another related to the non-ordinary states of consciousness that later I call as the holotropic states of consciousness. So I didn't see, of course, Albert until I could leave from Czechoslovakia. So for the first time, it was he came to Baltimore just to look at the new the psychedelic institute that we had there, and he wanted to go to Washington. And so I went with him to Washington, to the different places, to
The White House. The White House.
No, White House. But everything that was the different monuments, and the Paris and stuff like that, and Arlington. Kennedy, he was there.
Cemetery, yes.
Yeah, Arlington Hospital. Arlington Cemetery. Yeah. But then he wanted to go to White House, and at that time we could still come all the way there, right to the fence, and so we was looking there, and he came out. Like this out, like Oz, and he said, so this is the great White House with the great people, who changed the world. And this was
Who was president?
Yeah, it was Nixon, and
This I don't know. Some American help I need. That's an
You would
American
know.
help.
Anyway, and so I do.
Which year was it?
Do you know?
What year was it, sweetheart? What year?
73.
Maybe
73
maybe
ago.
That would have been
73.
Nixon.
Yeah, Nixon.
Yeah.
No, but there was somebody who was there also from. He was there anyway. So I said, Albert, do you know what you did in the world?
In the
You
world.
changed the world as compared to
Nixon.
Nixon, and the one that was even worse.
I don't know. I'm not good in American history.
And so then, after that, we have been quite a few. When I was going to
Switzerland.
Switzerland, I always came and spent there for some time. And the last thing was the day when he the year that he was dying. We were there for months before he died, and we talked. He was at that time, but still wanted to go to what was happening there. This
Conference.
it was a big conference, yeah, and he still wanted to talk that day, and then didn't feel right, so invited us for the whole afternoon
In the house.
and quite a bit we talked about his ideas about what would happen with LSD and with his other babies. It could be integrated into the society. And so we're talking about what was happening in Greece for 2,000 years. And of course, at that time, it was like a fantasy, that this could happen, because at this time was basically the beginning of the end of psychedelics at that point.
So you want to say it was the Eloisian mysteries?
Eloisian mystery, yeah.
You want to explain what it is, Eloisian mysteries?
Well, these were happening, for almost 2,000 years, every 5 years. And there was a substance which was called ketoon, and Albert and Gordon Watson started to work on this, and they came to the conclusion that it was very similar to LSD, actually, the ketoon.
So they were like big group rituals with psychedelic substances, and out of that came, the really the culture of like Greece, Aristotle, and so on, or all kinds of people were there, all kinds of philosophers and artists and statespeople were there that participated.
Yeah, well, we talk about the fact that it's a great scientists and artists, in Greece, and we don't hear about it, that there was a very powerful psychedelic substance that was happening for almost 2,000 years, every 5 years.
So that was really inspiring and
so-
shaping the culture. So coming from this inner transformation, these powerful tools, So
And so at this point, seems like fantasy that something like this could happen. And of course, now it's a very different situation with basically thanks to Rick Doblin, this really changed the situation in a dramatic way. And I always thought about, how is it possible, how he does that? And then I had the chance of being for a month in Israel, where we were bringing both MDMA as a therapy, and then the grass as the symptomatic thing. And so we were there for
4 weeks. Right?
4 weeks, and he didn't have an hour maybe that he was not working with somebody with politics and therapists, psychologists. So then I could understand, it's amazing energy.
Stan, how did you, when LSD and some of the substances were no longer as available and active. And out of that came holotropic breathwork. Where did the inspiration for that come from? How did that evolution happen for you?
Well, what happened is that I had a sabbatical, and I met Michael Murphy in New York, and he said, "Stan, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I have about a year, to work on a couple of sessions, a couple of books." And he said, "Well, why don't you come to SLN? SLN is a great place to write it. And so we'll give you a house there, and you have to work and work on the sessions,
With some workshops,
and trade it.
Mhm.
And so I came there, and I was giving these
seminars.
with people, and I was talking about what the experiences that we did in Prague and what we did in Baltimore and so on, and I have wonderful pictures, for patients and so on. And I was talking about the holotropic, the transpersonal experiences, And people say, "Well, that's great, but can we have an experience? Do you have a little stage there?" And I said, "Well, I don't think that people would like this in SLN." And so then I started thinking, what might do with it. And I remember that when I was working with LSD, at the beginning, whatever ended up, sometimes it was great experiences, and sometimes it was not resolved. And so we had to wait at that time for 10 days, which you need that time before you can get a full experience.
A new session.
Yeah.
Before a new session.
And then we have to do another session and hope that it's going to be better. And then what happened is that one of my patients there was coming down out of the LSD experience and felt really terrible, felt extremely angry and had pain in the
Arm.
shoulder, yeah. And I came to him and he said, "I think if you can put some
No, just like this, not like this, not boxing.
pressure on it,
Pressure, yeah.
And maybe it's going to help me." So I did. I started pushing, and at that point I couldn't hold it anymore, And he said, "Not enough, more." And then he started screaming and started coughing and shaking. And this could maybe 20 minutes or so, and he was in a great place. Everything was resilient,
Resolved.
was blissful and completely relaxed. And there was another situation not very far later. There was a patient, a woman, who had again experienced that she was coming down and not in a great place, and felt nauseated and had pain in the belly. So I came and I was sort of saying, "Where is it?" and poking a little. As I pushed sort of this, there was a projectile vomiting, just missed me just barely my head, And so then, brought some obtainer, and he continued 2 or 3 times, and again was in a great place. And so I get the idea that we can actually do something to improve the
integration.
the experience, to integrate. And so when we get in a situation where people felt there was still some not finished, I say, "Well, what is happening? Would you do it, or maybe do something from outside to accentuate it, and find how you want to express what it is?" So I started doing it systematically. And then in a couple of instances, both of them were actually patients, women, started breathing very fast, cathartic breathing.
Staccato.
And when she was doing it, when they were doing it, they said, it's incredible, I was already completely coming out of the experiences, but with the breathing brought me back as I was in the middle of the session again. So I then realized that if I can breathing faster, that I can sort of accentuate the
experience.
The experience, and then combining this with the body work as I started with those two first patients.
And the music.
And the music we do all the time, of course. But so this was the combination of the breathing and using the body work, and that's like a major help in psychedelic experiences.
And it's also it's following the same principle like the psychedelic sessions. It's you're not imposing anything on the person. It's you just lower the resistance to the unconscious by the breath, which is also done by the psychedelic, and that whatever wants to emerge, whatever is close will emerge. We're not influencing that. We're just creating the situation that the things can happen from within, from the inner healing intelligence of a person, and then we just the person would just follow that, and we would assist them in following what comes from within, which is wonderful. It's not, there's no expert out there. It's kind of it's the chef treatment from the divine within. So it's the best treatment you can get.
Now, this is what we were doing already at that time, way back, 50 years ago or so. That there was a tendency for people to bring some kind of specific school, psychoanalysis or something else, and use it with LSD. Use it with a specific concept.
Yes.
And when we found out that we can actually use this individual, that the psyche has an intelligence, as healing intelligence. And this is something that actually started with Jung, when Jung was working with dreams. Was very different from what Freud was doing. Freud was working with dreams from the past. Actually, there was a situation where he was in a train with people who was going with this train, and he started talking about his dreams and mentioned a dream which happened 50 years ago, or 20 years ago, and Freud was sitting and interpreted the dream right away. Now, Jung didn't want to do that. He when the patients would come, he asked them to lie down on the couch, and he wanted them to let the dream to go back and continue. He wanted to see as the material from the unconscious was coming.
But those were dreams from the present, not from the past, like recent dream.
And in something, this is a very interesting idea, that as he was working with the dream, that what is in the psyche of the patient, then what is closest to the surface, that's very charged energy, what Freud called ataxis. That the material starts coming automatically, the one that's most available at that time. And for that reason, it's also the one that is the symptoms. This is what gives problems to the patient, because that's when the unconscious is coming to the surface. And so he was doing it just with this dream. work. But then what we do, we add it to the holotropic breath work, which means it intensifies, but still takes you in the same direction, what is most available from the unconscious. And then if you take it one more step, then we have, of course, psychedelics, then the same principle, we get quite deep, to very frequently to the matrices of
perinatal
birth
matrices.
matrices or transpersonal experiences, archetypes, and so on. But the same principle is, what is available for the psyche already.
Well, I can certainly attest, having experienced both holotropic and a variety of plant-based medicines and whatnot, that I was shocked at how deep my experiences with holotropic breathwork were. They were just extraordinary. And that whole ability, that thing you call the cartography of consciousness, it was amazing how many corners I could go into in the holotropic breathwork. It was quite extraordinary.
Yeah. People frequently asking, what's the relationship between breathwork and psychedelics, and what it really is about the relationship between the unconscious and the consciousness. Of what there are people who are so available, that something is coming up without breathing, without psychedelic, spikes automatically, and for other people really try to have these experiences and cannot have it. So they get one. Psychedelics, breath work, and shamanic things, and they can really get into it. So it's really the question of the unconscious and whatever is holding.
Yeah.
Very frequently, when we go breathing, we have a situation where people are lying, and we bringing the relaxation, talk about it, go them through the different bodies and so on. Before we even start breathing, and there are some people who are already going, because at home they were trying to
hold it down.
It was holding out, and they were holding it because they're scared. But then they come and they see that people can deal with it. We can support with it. Then just let go. They don't need the breathing.
And it's also, in a way, how the psyche often works. It's like when you do a psychedelic, you could still say, oh, it's been the substance, it's the medicine that gave me that experience. And so in a way, the detour in between the psychedelic research through the breath work is in a way very good, because there you don't have a substance, you just have your breath, and you can have deep experiences. And so you can take it with you and say, oh, this is my psyche, this is really me. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yes.
So in a way, it's really validating.
Brigitte, I think it would be worth you telling your story. I mean, you've been at this for nearly 4 decades on your own. Tell us just a little bit about your own background and your own journey to the Esalen and the holotropic breath work, because you've got your own legacy and tradition here.
I have
That's with your mother.
My mother. Well, I when I was about 17, I had a boyfriend, and he said, one evening I stayed with him. He said, would you like to see God? I have a pill here. And I said, well, sure. I mean,
Why not?
sounds interesting. And so we both took a pill, and there was that ride, which was LSD. I had no idea, and it was really, really intense, and it was fast. And I mean, how LSD is really fast, and it was really overwhelming. But I also always had a sense of truth, that there was something was happening was true, and it felt almost like all my curtains from my consciousness had been pulled open, or in this night, you know. And also it was scary because I get paranoid because of he was not okay. And anyway, I ended up escaping from the house. It was an old farmhouse, and I was knocking at the other farmhouse, and there was the daughter there opened, and I think she had a little Basildorf. Her eyes were out like this, and she had a candle, and somehow she didn't get the police, but she took me with her and in her room, and she had a rocking chair and she was rocking, and I was telling her all these things, you know. I said, you know what, this closet is breathing, you know, and things like that. I mean, she didn't have a clue about anything, but she would just listen, and she was knitting and sitting in the rocking chair all night, you know, and I was having all these experiences. And so I made it through the morning, and, you know, and came home, but you know, my world had changed, and I have an older brother who used to explain me the world, and I told him about it, and he could not follow. So I had outgrown him, you know, and so I was very alone with this experience. I didn't see God, but I saw a lot of things, and it was very mixed. It was also scary, and I didn't talk about it, which was good, I think. And later I studied psychology, and there was no answer for any of these things. They were into rats and, you know, cognitive stuff, and not so much into the soul. So I finished that study, and I never wanted to be a therapist or anything like that. And I wanted to study art, which was my dream. So I made it into art school, and was happy there. And then somehow I found Stan's books. And I read those books, and I was like, oh my goodness, this guy knows something. Seriously, you know, he knows something. And there I learned that there are like, that I'm not a hopeless case, but there are like these different stages of birth with a quality of energy that eventually leads to the liberation. So, you know, if you have a difficult experience, it's just a step on a road, you know. You're not stigmatized by it or something like that. And so I thought, well, I really want to see that guy if he is like he writes. And at that time I didn't have a car somehow, and I don't know how this happened, but I asked my mother if she would drive me there. I never do things with my mother. I don't know what it was. Anyway, we came to a German town called Freiburg, and there was this, you know, this event, Dr. Groff, and my mother said, I'm going to sit in the back, sit in the front, you know. And then Stan walked in there, and he had this brown suit and a tie, and he was a really serious scientist. And later my mother said she expected somebody with like a Jesus, you know, sandals and stuff like that. So she was impressed, and he talked all evening about LSD. And I was in the first row, and I looked at him, and I said, I think this guy is great. I mean, he is great. So I don't know what my mother thought when he talked about LSD all night. But anyway, so after this, I thought I want to ask him what to do with my experience. And but there was, first of all, there was my mother, who shouldn't know I had done LSD, and there were lots of people. And I was kind of shy, and I, you know, didn't want to push. And I also wanted to make a very good impression. So this went on for a while, and then it was like a little nightmare. My mother was stepping forward, and she pulled him on the arm, and she said, Professor Groff, could you take her on my daughter, you know? And that was very embarrassing. You know, I thought I want to disappear in a hole, or everybody looked at me, who is this girl, you know? And so I spoke with Stan in English. I told about my experience, and he said, why don't you come to Esselen, you know? And also there was a conference in Switzerland where I did my first breath work. And when I did my first breath work, I had an incredible experience. It was like mind-blowing. I experienced a total liberation, and I felt like I was a bird, like a seagull or something, flowing over a coast, which I thought was Britannia at that time. And later, when I came to Esselen, I knew it was the Big Sur coast that I had seen, you know. And that first experience, it's a little bit like in a Jungian psychology, the initiatory dream or something like that. Gives you a perspective, and then you have to go back to the hard homework. And so I went to a month long at Esalen, and it was really looking at myself, and was really quite hard and tough. And I stayed longer. I knew I had to stay longer. So I stayed longer as a work scholar, which means you work 30 hours for the community and then you can go to workshops. And so I was going to all the workshops that Stan and Christina were offering and learning the work. And it was, you always said it was like a natural, it was more like remembering the work. It was learning it, but also remembering it. And it was really a very loving, supporting atmosphere to learn. And so I ended up, suddenly with running big groups in holotropic breathwork, and I was the youngest of the group. I was the leader, and so I came to this work and to this path, and ever since I've been on the holotropic path, and it's become my profession and my passion, and certainly the love for Stan has been a main energy in my life, and I feel so blessed to be married to this wonderful person, and to share the inner worlds and the inner travels. And when we got married, my mom loved Stan, and when Stan said to my mom, it took me 30 years to take her on. So that's my story, a bit of my story.
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. That your avocations and your vocations have been intertwined for many decades. And while we're on this, just this strand, say something about the Groff legacy training that you
Yes.
have been co-founding and co-creating, and within the context of the evolution of holotropic breathwork, because we've come a long way, 50 years, really, of the breathwork. So I think we'd love to hear a little bit more about how it has evolved and what's the frontier for you.
Yeah, I think do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the breathwork has been around for quite a while, and Stan and Christina developed it and brought it around the world. It started at some point when we met. There was no formal training, but then there was a formal training, which I participated in 3, I think, but after a while they got sort of tired of running this kind of thing and wanted to be more free, and gave it away to some people who took it over, and it's been going for a while. But Stan and Christina wanted to write books and not deal with business and all these things, and just Stan came. Christina was getting pretty sick then, but Stan came as a guest teacher. And when Christina died, he couldn't travel anymore because she was very ill. So he stayed with her and just worked in CIIS and so on. And when she had died, he started traveling again, and he went around the world and seeing what was happening. And so he found that he was not really totally happy with the development that had happened, and so he had his deep wish was to create a new training which would really represent his work the way, or their work the way he wanted that. And he was so unhappy, and he felt, even when he had the stroke, he felt he died. He was dying, he died, and he came back. He decided to come back for our love, and also for
Legacy, yeah.
for the legacy, for his work in the world. And so I knew what it would mean, and I was not looking for a job. I had a job, I knew it would be totally life consuming, but I just love Stan so much, and I hear him, listen to your husband, to your wife. And so I said, all right, I'm going to help you to do this. And then it was a big project. But once we we decided, it became like a birthing process, like in these sessions, it suddenly was something bigger wanted to happen. We were not sitting on the couch on Sunday afternoon being bored and how could we create as a new work? No, it was not like that. It was really something deeper, archetypal kind of energy that wanted to happen, something big wanted to happen. So we were just assisting that birth and the creation of that new training. And the part of what Stan was very unhappy about was that the old training had become like a for-profit family business. That was not his idea about his work in the world. And so what we have created now is like it should have been from the beginning. We are authorizing the good people in their countries to do their own trainings under our supervision. And we created the trademark, the brand Grof, not to make money from it, but to protect the Grof work, so that the people know where you see the Grof with the R, there is Grof inside, So it's a way to protect his work and legacy for the future of the planet, of the generations to come. And we are not getting any money from that, we just do this for service and protection. And of course, the teachers, or they get paid for their services. And so we have really great people in many countries, and we have big support from wonderful people, from institutions like Ubiquity and CIIS. We have Esalen, we have Rick Tarnas, we have
Erwin
Laszlo, Rupert Sheldrake, and so on. I mean, you will see it all on our website. It's called groflegacytraining.com, and there you will find services in your country. And so they all Grof. We can give you the link.
They have now been for quite a while, waiting for. When they could be work on the floor, yeah.
Well, the COVID was, of course, blocking everything, because the last thing you should do is lie on a mattress, scream and yell at people without a mask and cough at them. So that was not a very healthy thing for healing. So, but also the other thing is it was a time of leavening. We have extreme. What the good news is, before Stan had that stroke, we did a whole series of teleseminars with Shift Network, where Stan is really all his knowledge presenting on video conference with pictures, and this has subtitles now in many languages. So this is available. You can buy it from Shift Network, but it's also available in the training. And the way of the psychonaut, Stan's encyclopedia with all his knowledge is translated in all languages. It's also the basis of our training. And we just also created last year, we created a film about the body work and the music and a manual of how to use these things in the training.
We send it to Jim.
People will get a lot of wonderful material and training. So we just wanted to make sure that his work or the Grof work in this context, for trademark reasons, we had to rename holotropic breathwork as Grof breathwork. So you will see Grof breathwork, but this is actually the original form of the holotropic breathwork that Stan and Christina developed, and this is to protect that, we're very, very eager that we make sure it doesn't get changed, or because it's really a great form. And so, so this is where we are, and now things are starting slowly, but they're starting, and
people are really now beginning
the training also on the mattress. I mean, still have to be careful with testing and so on. So we know that, but slowly things start developing,
Sure.
And it's so needed. And also, just speaking of the psychedelics, it's wonderful to see the psychedelic renaissance, but it's also sometimes a bit scary, because we see that I always say I mean, a psychedelic is not a cookie. This is powerful, powerful medicine, really powerful. And I mean, the ones of you who have experienced it, they know it. And so we also we just started a psychedelic sitter training in Spain and also in Canada. So this is one of our
friends.
It's not a psychedelic sitter training, but it's important for us that we guarantee a good quality and that the people who are trained by us, they're really well trained. Also the psychedelic people, they have experiences with the substances, and they learn to sit with each other, and also they learn the body work, they learn the breath work, so they're really skilled to be there for others. And so that's our mission, you know, to make the inner journey, the healing. I mean, imagine you're in an inner journey like a psychedelic or breath work, and nobody's with you, number one, or somebody's with you who doesn't have a clue, and that could be so re-traumatizing. That we really don't want that to happen. And also we are highly into ethics. I mean, we don't want anybody to be sexually molested in these states, you know, which has happened, unfortunately happened. So we are really, you know, into that, to make it safe and beautiful for people to undertake these journeys.
Let me ask you a question that came in from one of our community, Amy Blumenschein, about your advice, whether something like the holotropic breath work or psychedelics would be appropriate for someone with stage 4 cancer, someone in an extreme physical condition. What would be your
we have done
comment?
it, you know. We have done it. We started in Baltimore, you know. So that was. We had about 200 of these patients, and of course
cancer patients. There were cancer patients.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they were actually most of them were patients who there was no help for them. Mm-hmm. This was the condition for us.
Yeah,
there was at a certain point when we already get the results from it, then we had brought some of the patients themselves who actually much earlier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we have all this happening, you know, and then of course for almost 30, 40 years, you know, nothing was happening, and now it's coming back.
Well, in Canada, some colleagues they do work with terminal ill cancer patients with psilocybin.
Now, the only thing you have to look, you know, what the condition is. Otherwise, it's the hard things, you know, pressure and so on.
Well, typically, I mean, what you would not do is MDMA. That is really hard on the body. You know?
LSD is very, very
LSD
good,
and psilocybin are they are very intense psychologically, but physically mild. So
I worked with one of these patients who did not die, you know, in the session, but he died 4 days later. He had cancer, which was all through her body, and she was terribly fear of death. Then somehow, then he had the experience with God and so on, and then was able to go, you know.
It can reduce the fear of death.
Let me just ask.
Let
me just ask a question of both of you. You know, when you're very ill and you have cancer, you have some other debilitating illness, you take LSD or you take psilocybin mushroom. Stan and Brigitte, what kind of happens when that drug hits the disease? Why is the psychedelic ingestion therapeutic on something like stage 4 cancer? What's happening?
Well, what happens very frequently is the experience of death and rebirth. You know, but like then the death already happened, and you are just in another realm. So people then start applying that to what would happen when they actually die. So we had several of these patients in Baltimore who had them, as patients, and after they had these experiences, that they had some problems, that they almost died. For example, one of them was with the United, for example. They were doing it, and he lost. He was basically close to death, and then come back. And he said, when we came back, he says, "I'm glad that I saw those experiences, because I'm glad that I know what it's about, So they basically compared what he had with us, the psychedelic experience, and then what was happening when he had near-death experience, really happening.
Yeah.
So that's one important thing. Also with ketamine, it's very common. A lot of people had the feeling that they had the experience of death, and coming back.
Yeah.
And they apply that, the experience that they had, apply it for what's going to happen in the future.
Stan, my wife and I, through Age Nation, work a lot with people who are in the second half of life. And one of our long-term goals has been our hope to be able to introduce psilocybin and LSD in literally the treatment of old age, so that so many people are not trapped in the fear of death that causes them to do a lot of different physical things that don't improve the quality of life, and it still doesn't assist them in the dying process. So what you've been saying and the work that you've done with people who are aging or are close to death certainly indicates a possible direction that this work can take with people that are older. What's your experience with holotropic in the same vein?
When there's a little more pressure,
The breath work is more pressure, or
well, if you have a psychedelic experience, particularly we didn't mention yet, we have now experience with the 5-methoxy DMT, which is from
the toads.
toast, which is an amazing, very easy experience. I am not afraid to do it, when I'm 91
well, he's
now.
91. He had a stroke, so this really works. And
I'm not worried to use that. It's a very, very. So
it's physically very.
I would start
safe.
with that to see what it would look like.
It's very, very intense. It brings you
have very powerful
right to the
experiences.
point, especially what you were saying, George, in the older age. It's probably a practice of dying, and it's about the dissolving of the ego, and it brings you right there. And it starts right away. You don't have to wait for hours, and it ends quite quickly. You get episodes of like 20 minutes, and then you can decide, do I want to go further? They
are now working on it. It's not available yet, officially.
Yes, but we believe that this is the medicine of the future, because it can be handled comfortably. You don't have to sit for somebody for 8 hours. So you can decide. If within 2 hours you can have a good introduction talk, a meeting, and you could work on the mattress for an hour or so, and then you would have an integration.
And you can do it in stages,
You can always decide, do I want to go deeper or more? And so this is a practice of dissolving. I mean, that's really. I mean, I do it for that reason, And Stan really, I mean, he had the stroke, and we want to do psychedelic work. It's also good for the healing, but also we don't want a challenge his body and his health, and so
I wouldn't take MDMA,
we don't do that.
but
Birgit, would
so
you?
anyway, you were asking about the breath work.
Yes.
We
as
have
well.
done it many patients who had cancer already. We have not done the breath work with very serious patients. This is what we were doing with psilocybin and with LSD. There was the breathing. You have to work yourself much
Yes.
more. This with the psychedelics, it does it for you. So basically, it's the question that it's not dangerous for you.
I mean,
we didn't use, for example, people who have cancer of the brain,
no.
because they didn't seem to integrate this experience. This was not very clean experience as it was with other. But otherwise, we just question, whether it's how difficult the art might be and so on.
I mean, the person would have to be in a physical condition that they could do sports.
Yes.
Yes. Because you could breathe, the breathing. And so. But of course, we had participants who had cancer in seminars and so on, and it's always good to breathe and to get rid of blockages and to activate the wisdom of the body and the soul. And so it's very good.
Always ideal is to come early, rather than when it's really terminal,
Would you repeat the name of the substance that you were talking about that's in development and hasn't been released yet?
5-methoxy-DMT.
So it's a form of DMT.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's
But
also
much
called
better, much better.
5
DMT itself is very short, it's like this one particularly with smoking,
but very intense. It brings you right there. So
You just put it in the chat.
well, I have it there. Oh, I didn't send it. Sorry.
What else do
I'm
you?
sure it's going to come soon, because it's ideal. I think it's ideal substance for the future.
What else do you see? What else do you see for the future? What's the next step in this work that can help transform humanity, for that matter?
I think we know that a lot of the traumas come from birth, so we could handle birth differently, which is already known. For example, people doing mentioned the working in water, for example, being birth in Vita, being there with father and father and mother,
Well,
and you could have also doing some experiences right after the mother experience, for example. So a lot of the can resolved, and then also there's a tendency when a lot of the children, they scream and so on, a tendency to stop it rather than encourage. So they can do a lot of breath work before they need it. So now we say, when people are now having these kinds of experiences, we say, do it now, don't wait 20 years and pay a lot of money. Because the trauma of the experience is there available. So when the people are screaming and so on, this is really trying to release it, and there's a tendency to stop it.
Yes.
Well, in general, we don't notice this anymore, but we are so used to process, Sometimes the people say, "Oh, they come to the group and say people are screaming and doing this and that." They say, "How can you stand that?" And I say, "It's music in my ears, because the real suffering is quiet, and once the people start expressing it, it's already leaving the system. So
Yes.
it's a good news. And if people just get more used to good process, and that actually, I think you should probably would be the sense of Sunday, get together and don't sit on hard benches, but get a couple of mattresses on the floor and start breathing together, and then would be good for the world.
You see, the other thing would be great, would be bringing in the rites of
Passage.
rite of passage, which all the different countries they have it around the 40s,
Cultures, yes.
around the puberty,
For the young people to have that.
So if we could have rites of passage, people can work through a lot of stuff that way. We have tried it already with the breath work and other things,
That would be great.
And in between, there could be some things that could be children have done, with full of play and stuff like that,
I think there
Well,
also should be mandatory sessions for the UN and for most governments. They should require all legislatures to go through holotropic breath work and take psilocybin and LSD. I understand you suggested once, Stan, that the way to clean up the world would be to give everyone a tab.
Well, maybe
Well,
politicians should qualify.
this is-
They should qualify by going through some psychedelic and holotropic procedures.
Yes.
This has to be done, who is doing it.
You get a driver's license. You should
Yes.
get a license to become parents and to become politicians. And I mean,
I think
if you need a license to drive a car, you should need a license to drive the world.
That's
you know?
true.
True.
the-
And just like you
So
end up,
the mostly think that is available, who want it, that it's available, that would be great, rather than forcing people to do it,
With good guide, with good support.
Although with the rites of passage, whatever they do psychedelics, or sometimes they do other pretty drastic procedures, there it's forced. They have to do it.
Well, again, as we said, it's really important that people who are accompanying people in these states are really well trained and they know what they're doing, their experience. And we also believe that where we all see what's happening in the outer world, this is either a transformatory crisis or we're just going down the tubes altogether. So our experience, it seems so important to do the inner work, because the inner psychedelic holotropic work, as many people as we can, because somehow our individual consciousness and the collective is not separate. So besides doing things in the outer world that help the planet, it's really important to do the inner work, to work on that level too.
Yes.
I think also important to bring the family into it. The major on the 60s was that a lot of the kids were into psychedelics and the parents were very much against it.
Give some psychedelics
so
to your grandmother. That's the message.
A lot of the question would be, I think this is interesting. What Michael is,
Michael.
what we mentioned yesterday.
Michael, yeah. Well,
Michael, this bringing it, for people who really would never do it, and they sort of managed to bring it in some way.
and it's just always good to work on oneself, and as I know that I like that it's a Chinese saying, if we all clean up in front of our house, of our own house, the streets will be clean.
Yes.
So it's I think it's so tempting to look outside and, judge things and know about it, but to go inward and really look at ourselves, I think is really important.
So it's interesting also, this is what Brigitte mentioned, that many people, when they have a psychedelic experience, they say, like, I have always known that. You see, this is, this is not, it's kind of very new, but it's also kind of old.
Remembering.
Because it has been, in archetypes, it's been there for years.
But this is why one of the wonderful things that Stan has brought to the world, and we are all so grateful for, to make us remember who we really are. I think that's
I think, what's happening with the psychedelics, many people who would never do anything with non-ordinary states, it's psychedelics, but they do something with the breath work, and then once they have experienced quite a bit, they say, well, maybe one step further, and they end up with shaman somewhere in Peru and Mexico and so on. It's like a step, and people are not afraid anymore, when they experience it in this context with the breath work and the whole context.
Well, for me, it was certainly, once my psyche had figured out how the breathwork works, it got harder to get in, my defenses were going up quite a bit. And so for me, the psychedelics were really opening a whole different world, so.
Well, thank you both so much, Stan and Brigitte.
Yeah.
This has been just awesome and just very endearing to see both of you so deeply in love and supporting one another. And by the way, everyone, just to honor Brigitte for a moment, Ubiquity University last year or earlier this year presented Brigitte with an honorary PhD for her own extraordinary work in the development of the holotropic breath work, and for her support for the pioneering activity that Stan has been leading for so many decades. So we have two giants with us today, and I just want to acknowledge, Brigitte, your role and your support in this whole endeavor. It's very precious and very inspiring.
Jim, we would like to say, for you have done, it's
amazing.
Ubiquity and before. Amazing,
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For what you are doing in the world. Okay.
Yes, well, thank you. We're all doing the little bits that we can.
That's right.
So, George, give us just a quick word about tomorrow before we sign off.
Well, tomorrow we have an eclectic group, some who practice and support the use of psychedelics in therapy, and some who take other routes and use other herbs and things. So it'll be a good way to finish the week. It's been a privilege to spend time with you both, Brigitte and Stan, and I want to thank you for the incredible contributions you both make. And we'll be
We
doing.
could say that.
Go ahead, Stan.
Yes.
I have to mention there's a book about death, which might be interesting for people who.
Oh, okay. Which one?
The mind that was after.
Which one is it? I don't know.
So you can look at it. It's,
I don't have this.
The original one that I did with John, and then it's Bruce, which is from Maps. Yeah.
What is the title? Do you remember?
I'm trying to. I have it several languages now.
No, I don't know this word.
Well, if you when you remember it, if you send it to us, we'll make sure
and you can
resend
make
it.
sure. All right, great,
Yes.
great.
And
Let it go. We'll give it later. We give it later.
Good.
So thank you,
blessings.
Stan. Thank you,
Yes.
Brigitte. Thank you, George.
all.
This has been an extraordinary session. Thank you for the vastness of your caring.
Yes.
It
Well, I'm
illuminates our
I'm
world.
just keeping him alive. We are working on having him be 100. That's the goal.
Oh, let's do it.
I do everything for that.
By the way,
Let's do
everyone,
it.
we celebrated Stan's 80th by convening for the first time ever a global breathwork
90th.
day, everyone on the
80th.
same day. And then when he turned 90, as you may recall from last year, we had once a month, we gathered people who've been important to Stan and have known Stan over the years and the decades to celebrate his 90th. So now I'm just wanting to commit that when you reach 100, we are going to have a global celebration, Dr. Groff, that will end all, will be the mother of all celebrations. Thank you, everyone. That'll do it for us for
Thank you.
today.
Yeah.
Bye for now. Blessings,
Bye-bye.
blessings.
Bye bye. Thanks.